Ladies and gentlemen, I'm David Ignatius. I'm a columnist for the Washington Post and a friend of the Aurora Initiative and this wonderful event tonight. And on behalf of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and the National September 11 Memorial and Museum, I want to welcome you to this event, focusing on our, as our title says, solidarity beyond borders, stepping up when others step back, which I hope will be an exploration of the gift and the mystery of the heroism that we remember, especially in this place. As many of your speakers just saw on a tour of this museum, this is a special, I want to say, a sacred place for Americans and for people around the world. It's a place where we remember the very worst that human beings are capable of, and we also remember the very best. I want to thank Anthony Gardner, who gave us a powerful tour of this building and evoked the memory of his own brother, Harvey, who died here. Tonight, we're going to focus on the best of what people can do, the spirit of heroism and sacrifice that leads people, as happened on 9/11, to step forward and take risks, take responsibility for others, and make the generous commitment that Aurora has been trying to understand and honor now for several years. In our conversations, we'll talk about how this mysterious process of heroism happens, how we can encourage it to happen more and more widely. And I hope that by the end of our discussions, we all will have thought about this central challenge in new ways. I want to open the event by asking our host, Alice Greenwald, who is the president and chief executive officer of this extraordinary museum, the National September 11 Memorial and Museum, to open our conversation and come to the stage. Alice.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. I really do want to thank you for joining us for tonight's very special program, which we are truly honored to co-host with the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative. You know, when I think about what constitutes heroism, I don't think about superhuman people doing superhuman things. I think about a Polish housewife who, when asked why she had taken in and hidden, fed, and protected a Jewish child during the Holocaust, at the risk of her own life and at the risk of the safety of her own children, looked quizzically at her interviewer and answered, "That's what people do. That's what people do." Yet we all know that not all people respond selflessly when witnessing injustice or in the face of unimaginable danger or violence, come to the aid of others without regard for their own well-being. Still, we also know stories of men and women who do respond, individuals like those you're going to meet this evening, who choose in times of grave danger to step up in selfless, compassionate, and fundamentally humane ways. I like to think of this as corresponding to the spectrum high or low of IQ or EQ, emotional intelligence. I'm beginning to think there's another quotient to measure, another EQ, or maybe we'll call it MQ, which is empathic intelligence. Heroes are people with high empathic intelligence. We live in a world where there is a shocking degree of what psychologists are now calling empathy deficit. And so we are all the more amazed when we encounter people who act out of a surplus of empathy when their fellow human beings are in need. I cannot think of a more appropriate location for a program focused on the empathic roots of heroism than the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. You are sitting here at the epicenter of two terrorist attacks, the first of which, the World Trade Center bombing that killed 6 individuals and an unborn child, was perpetrated 25 years ago this past Monday. And 8 years later, the World Trade Center, as you know, would again be targeted in the most devastating attack on domestic soil by a foreign entity in the history of this nation, resulting in the murder of 2,977 innocent people. The history we document here, the stories we tell, are filled with tragedy and heartbreak. Against this backdrop of grief, we also tell stories of courage and resilience, of coworkers helping coworkers, strangers coming to the aid of strangers, first responders running into danger to rescue and assist. Stories that testify to the triumph of human decency over human depravity. Stories that offer a powerful reminder that it is in times of greatest darkness that we do shine the brightest. Visitors to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum cannot escape the reality that human beings are capable of doing terrible things to one another, and that we may not always have complete control over preventing these horrible acts of murder and destruction. But our visitors also gain another understanding, a deeper one, that the one thing we do have control over is how we respond. The story of 9/11 is also the story of 9/12, epitomized by acts of public service and volunteerism. That generosity is of spirit born of shared grief and a fundamental recognition of shared humanity becomes a model for how to live in an interconnected world. How we respond defines who we are, what kind of society we want to leave and bequeath to our children and our grandchildren. These models of compassion and hope are not unique to New York City. Individuals who exhibit these values can be found around the world, and we are fortunate to be able to hear from a few of them tonight. At a time when lack of empathy for the misfortune of others is routinely demonstrated, promoted, and at times even legislated, there is no more effective way to champion the value and urgency of action in support of others than to celebrate the stories of those who step up. These stories must be told, they need to be remembered, but most importantly, we need to learn from them. And so, to begin our program, it is my privilege to introduce the next speaker. This remarkable man co-founded the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative on behalf of survivors of the Armenian genocide and in recognition of those who take action to assist others at moments of critical need. He is a scholar of history and a humanist, has led venerable academic and cultural institutions, is currently the 12th president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and a much beloved and respected member of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum's Board of Directors. More than anything else, to me, he is the definition of the word mensch, and that's Armenian. Please join me in welcoming a great friend of this institution and a stalwart believer in our shared innate human capacity to step up, Dr. Vartan Grigoryan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Alice, for the generous introduction. I wish I were a mensch. I would be taller, bigger, muscular, but I'm not. Thank you for giving your gracious remarks. I especially want to thank trustees of 9/11 Memorial Museum who are here, and also various Armenian and American dignitaries from diplomatic as well as social intellectual world who are here. Finally, I would like to salute two visionaries, Ruben Vardanian and Nubar Vefeyan, who launched the Aurora Humanities Initiative. I am grateful to them and privileged to be included in their effort. Last but not least, thank you, Professor Zimbardo, David Ignatius, and our new heroes, the recipients of Aurora Prize, Margarita Baranquite Dr. Thomas Catena, and of course, our own Lieutenant Bill Keegan. Also, I thank our partner, John Pendergast, founding director of the Enough Project. The reason we're here, and we're meeting here this evening, is this great monument, a museum, stands as a memorial for those who died in a senseless and dastardly terrorist attack, to remember them, to express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for those who died, and the many who demonstrated heroism and self-sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds. We are also here today only to remember those who sacrificed themselves in the recovery efforts, but who have carried forward their memory to inspire those who visit and pay tribute to them, as Alice described. The Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and the Aurora Prize are byproducts of the Armenian genocide of 1915-1923, when 1.5 million Armenians perished. We are here to thank Henry Morgenthau, the U.S. ambassador to Ottoman Empire, who in 1913-1916, who was the first to alert the U.S. and the world that the Ottoman authorities had issued a death warrant against the Armenians. Morgenthau noted that the great massacres and persecutions of the past seem almost insignificant when compared with the suffering of the Armenian race. Morgenthau made public what Wangenheim, the German ambassador to Ottoman Empire, a World War ally of his, had communicated privately, namely, and I quote, "The aim of the Young Turks was to annihilate the Armenian race," period. Morgenthau described the genocidal acts of the Ottoman Empire as acts that surpassed the most beastly and diabolical cruelty ever before perpetrated or imagined in the history of mankind. He published his book, Account of the Armenian Genocide, in Morgenthau's Memoirs and later Murder of a Nation. President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, who has been champion of Armenians from 1890s on, wrote that Armenian massacres was the greatest crime in World War I, and failure to act against Turkey was to condone it. Moreover, he said, we should go to war against Ottoman Empire, because not to do so is really to show bad faith towards our allies. In the case of the Holocaust, as you well know, on August 24, 1941, in a live broadcast from London, Winston Churchill described the Holocaust as a crime without a name. Similarly, there was no universally accepted term for Armenian and other ethnic groups' wholesale deportations, massacres, and ethnic cleansing until a Polish Jewish intellectual, Raphael Lemkin, came up with the term, or coined the term actually, genocide, which was formally accepted by United Nations in 1948. We are here also to thank Americans and American philanthropy, for rescuing and caring for the remnants of Armenian genocide, because it was Americans who, in response to Armenian massacres, formed the National Armenian Relief Committee under the aegis of Reverend Henry Satterley, Bishop of Washington, Levi Morton, Governor of New York and ex-Vice President of the United States, and of course Clara Barton, President of American Red Cross, who embarked upon the fundraising. Initially, it was hoped to raise $100,000. The committee, which later became the Risk Relief, was able to raise an extraordinary, unheard of by then, sum of $100 million. In World War I, it was the largest effort of philanthropy in U.S. history. Upon its establishment, an average of 333,000 people were fed daily. Some 39 hospitals were erected, which took care of some 30,000 children in orphanages, providing instruction and literacy to all the orphans. Indeed, the Risk Relief was the only foreign agency allowed to operate in the Caucasus after Sovietization of the region. In 1926, as late as 1926, it still supervised the welfare of 17,000 children in Armenia alone. Recently, Robert Morgenthau, the famous district attorney of New York and great-grandson of Morgenthau, cited a quote from Hitler in Wall Street Journal that when Nazis launched their plan in 1939, Hitler said to wipe out Jews, Gypsies, Poles, Slavs, and other undesirable elements. He said, "Who, after all, speaks for Armenians' annihilation today?" Well, we do. That's why we're here in this institution. But we're here for other reasons also, because we believe, like my friend and late Elie Wiesel, who with George Clooney headed the jury that is charged to select Aurora Prize recipient, said human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere. We agree with that. And also, we are here because not only Americans rescued Armenians, but something else happened. They also stood for Armenian independence. From 1915 on, four presidents, former and then, ending up with Woodrow Wilson, spoke of and wanted to have home for Armenians to be Armenian Republic. This ended in 1920 with the Treaty of Sèvres, which created a big Armenia and also for currently big also Kurdistan, which now they realized that Kurdistan will be a major creation of an American mind rather than regional things. We're here also to thank them for defending Armenian Republic and investing in them. What does Aurora Prize have to do this? To give back. The two founders, Ruben and Glubar, have personal stories to say, as all of them. We no longer mourn Armenian genocide. We've come from it. We are a nation. We have a state. We have in the diaspora major forces, Armenians, and we're trying to give back to those who rescued us. And that's a wonderful thing coming from a small nation which does not have resources, but has the heart and the will in order to commit to rescue others, to witness against persecution, to witness against genocide, to witness for justice, but most importantly, to witness human decency and awaken the conscience of humanity. The subject matter of this prize is not one of financial reward. It's 1,100,000. 100,000 goes to the recipient. 1 million goes to what recipient has been inspired from sources and what organization. So that in itself also recreates additional giving. I like to end up with a quote, one of my favorite people, Theodor Adorno, who not many people know, philosopher, warned us a long time ago the fact that forgetting is inhuman because men's accumulated suffering is forgotten. The historical trace of things, words, colors, and sounds is always the trace of past suffering. As soon as all tradition is extinguished, inhumanity begins. We cannot assassinate memory nor extinguish it. But remembering is not enough. Out of remembering comes from action. And what Ruben and Dubar have brought, action, along with remembrance, to thank America, to thank the world, whether it's France and Norway even I found, we have to witness everywhere where good men and good women, good nuns, good doctors, good shepherds came, lived with Armenians, died with Armenians, rescued the Armenians, and that's why we're here, to show that sacrifice matters, witnessing or goodness matters, justice matters, human beings matter. Thank you very much for coming.
At a time when over 65 million people are homeless and displaced, and 33,000 more are forced to flee their homes each day because of conflict or persecution, our humanity impels us to help save lives and offer hope. As descendants of Armenian genocide survivors, we recognize that we have survived and thrived thanks to the audacity and sacrifice of those who intervened to rescue our ancestors. It is in memory of those rare, selfless saviors that we created the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity, a global humanitarian award dedicated to raising public awareness about the extraordinary human beings who endanger their own lives to save others. The Aurora Humanitarian Initiative is co-founded by Vartan Grigoryan, Nubar Efeyan, and Ruben Vartanyan. The Aurora Laureate receives a $100,000 grant, as well as the unique opportunity to continue the cycle of giving by nominating the organizations that inspired their work to share a $1 million award. The Aurora Prize is being awarded annually in Armenia. A group of exceptional individuals with notable achievements in the field of humanitarian affairs select the Aurora Prize laureate: George Clooney, Vartan Gregorian, Oscar Arias, Lord Ara Darzi, Lema Gabawi, Shireen Ebadi, Gareth Evans, Hina Gilani, Bernard Kushner, Samantha Power, Mary Robinson, Ernesto Zedillo. Every year, hundreds of guests gather in Yerevan, Armenia during the Aurora weekend for the presentation of the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity and special events. The finalists of the Aurora Prize are being recognized for their courage and commitment to fight against injustice and violence. The 2017 Aurora Prize finalists were Fartun Adan and Ilwad Elman, Jamila Afghani, Dr. Tom Katina, Muhammad Darwish, and Dr. Dennis Mukwege. And the 2016 Aurora Prize finalists were Marguerite Barankitse, Father Bernard Kinvi, Dr. Tom Katina, and Saida Ghulam Fatima. The 2017 Aurora Prize was awarded to Dr. Tom Katina, a Catholic missionary from New York who has saved thousands of lives as the sole doctor permanently based in Sudan's war-ravaged Nuba Mountains, where humanitarian aid is restricted. Dr. Katina's visit to Armenia became possible thanks to 3 courageous Armenian doctors who left for the Nuba Mountains to temporarily substitute him. The inaugural Aurora Prize was awarded to Marguerite Barankitse from Burundi for the extraordinary impact she has had in saving thousands of lives and caring for orphans and refugees during the country's years of civil war. The laureates of the Aurora Prize continued cycle of giving by donating a $1 million award to organizations that implement projects in 14 countries, helping underprivileged people to get better education, healthcare, and advancing aid and rehabilitation. The Aurora Humanitarian Initiative is committed to building a broader humanitarian movement. It spans a number of projects, including the Aurora Dialogues, the Aurora Humanitarian Index, the 100 Lives Project, and the Aurora Gratitude Projects, which involve a number of educational initiatives, together valued over $7 million. The benefactors of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative are Albert Avdolyan, Samvel Karapetyan, Sergei Sarkisov. We extend our gratitude to all our donors, supporters, and friends, and acknowledge the support of those who choose to remain anonymous. Aurora is gratitude in action, fostering a cycle of giving by enabling devoted humanitarians.
What is encouraging to see how people from around the world are joining this effort. This effort is not one of the 3, but one of the many through the 3. So I hope all of you will seize on that and participate in this great adventure on behalf of mankind. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a native-born New York, psychologist and professor emeritus in my alma mater, I should say, Stanford University. He's founder and president of the Heroic Imagination Project, which is dedicated to promoting heroism. Dr. Zimbardo will speak about statistical data based on his research, how to cultivate heroism, and why we need heroes now. Dr. Zimbardo.
I am honored to be chosen to be your keynote speaker. I will start my slideshow with, we're going to look back to those emergent heroes and more positively look ahead to inspiring new generations of youth heroes that we call everyday heroes in training. So we begin with remembering the past. We're in the location where these terrible things happened, September 11th, 2001, that we can never forget. But we have to transform that memory into positive action. And that's what I've been trying to do with my life since that time. So how was I personally affected by that, impacted by that event? At that time, I was the president-elect of the American Psychological Association. I grew up in the Bronx, actually in the ghetto in the South Bronx, as a poor Sicilian immigrant child. And I consider myself a lifelong New Yorker, although I live in San Francisco since 1968 when I started teaching at Stanford. How did I respond? I worked with Dr. Ellen McGrath and her husband, Dr. Harry Wexler, to provide therapeutic treatment for the families of the Brooklyn Heights Fire Department, 11 of whom were killed on that day. We offered legal and accounting help for their families, and we also gave therapy to their families. And later on, Ellen herself did therapy in the fire department. At the following convention of the American Psychological Association, I honored firemen from that firehouse, Richie Murray, on behalf of the first responders and firemen who survived and the many who died. So here am I, the day the dark time brought solidarity in New York City and worldwide. Thousands of people chose to be heroes by stepping up. So here am I with Richie on the site of that terrible, on the pile of that terrible event. So what is a hero? There are many definitions of hero. Mine is a psychological one. It's someone who acts on behalf of others in need or in defense of a moral cause if you're a whistleblower. They are aware of the risk to life, career, or finances, but they're usually modest and humble. Almost in every case, when you say, wow, that was really heroic, they always say, I did what I had to do. I did what anyone should do. Just as we heard earlier from Irina Sendlerova in Poland, who organized a group of 19 women and one man, and they saved 2,500 children from the Warsaw Ghetto. But moral courage is at the core of heroic action, not bravery. It's moral courage. Why do we need heroes? Heroes help us shift the norm from passive compliance, accepting the situation as it is, to pro-social action. Heroes transform compassion, which is a cognitive, emotional state, and empathy, into action. Action is what changes the world. True heroes put their best self forward in service to all of humanity. Heroes are the force of good that opposes evil in all of its many forms, both perpetrators of the evil of action and also the evil of inaction, not doing the right thing when you could. Are these our only heroes? When I give lectures to high school students, I ask them, who are your heroes? And they say Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. And I say, you know what? Every one of you has something that they envy. You have something that none of them have. It's called a brain. You have a brain. None of the superheroes have brains. They are the brainchild of a cartoonist. So now you have this special gift, and your obligation to the world is use your brains wisely and well to make the world better. So our two Aurora Prize heroes that you've heard of, Maggie and Dr. Tom. Maggie will be on our panel soon, and we're going to hear a video. We'll see Dr. Tom in a video he will present shortly. So finally, let's inspire our youth to become what I call everyday heroes. In 2010, I started a nonprofit in San Francisco called the Heroic Imagination Project, or HIP. The idea is that heroism starts in the imagination, imagining I could be one. So we're not talking about military heroes. We're not talking about people who sacrifice their lives. We're talking about teaching people, inspiring people, high school students, and now our program is we're putting in organizations to stand up, speak out, and take action. And those actions can change the world. Our premise is ordinary people are capable of taking extraordinary action. So these heroes are ordinary people, but it's their action that's extraordinary, and that's what we want to acknowledge and reward. So how can you begin to inspire heroism? What I did is I created lessons. I'm a social psychologist, so I created a number of lessons in prejudice, in the growth mindset, replacing a fixed mindset. And the one most relevant for us is a lesson in the bystander effect. Each of our lessons is about 3 hours long. We include provocative videos. The teacher is no more a teacher. The teacher's a coach. And the teacher organizes her classes in pairs. We show a video of a woman lying on the steps, looking unconscious, and then we see 35 people pass by in 4 minutes and no one helps. That's called the bystander effect. The bystander effect started in New York when Kitty Genovese was killed in Kew Gardens, you remember, about 60 years ago, and no one answered her cries. Two colleagues of mine, Bib Latney and John Darley, who were at Columbia and NYU, coined the term bystander effect. The bystander effect is when in an emergency, 2 or more people don't help, they form a social norm of do nothing, and anybody else passes, then it's this negative impact, they do nothing. But soon as one person steps in to help, then immediately a second person joins in. So what we do is we teach in our lesson how to recognize bystander effects in your own life. And between good intentions and good action, there are always challenges, obstacles. We teach you the critical thinking of going from your intention to the right action. We want you to be a wise and effective hero. We don't want you to die in battle. So we teach you how to respond mindfully and wisely to ambiguous situations, and then make a personal plan for future situations. So for example, we say there are 5 main obstacles to helping somebody in an emergency. One of them is you're distracted or in a hurry. We're all on cell phones, we're all rushing to work, but you notice somebody is lying down, or there's a car stalled on the highway. It's an ambiguous event. You're not sure what you should do. Typically, if several people pass by and do nothing, no help is provided. But you notice the event because we train you to always be sociocentric. Look out at the environment. What's that? You recognize it could be unsafe. If it's unsafe, you don't do an unwise thing. You call 911. Or you say, hey, I need help, and you get other people to join in. But you always assume responsibility to act wisely and well. And we teach you appropriate ways to respond. And then at the end, you provide the help. And when we get young people to go through our lessons, and at the end, they make a commitment not only to do so in the future, but they share our lesson with their parents and family. So what we have learned is we've been doing, we'll show you this program around the world. We have pre-post measures of effectiveness. They learn our messages. It improves their positive attitude, their self-esteem. We reduce prejudice and dropout rates. Boys, especially now, are dropping out of school in staggering numbers. Parents, teachers, and pupils say they love these lessons. And it increases leadership and compassion. We did a case study at Cal State University in East Bay in California. We gave our lesson to 108 students from a variety of different ways of presenting the information. We gave pre-post questionnaires, and we got these highly significant effects. Participants agree the utility of our lessons, the relevance, how they're understandable, the likelihood that they're going to use these lessons, and it contributes to their academic development. And all of these measures are highly significant. Lastly is, I work with a group in San Francisco called Bright City, spelled with S rather than C. What they do is they teach people how to communicate in dyads, how to communicate compassionately for students as well as people in business. But they use our lesson, the heroic imagination lesson, as the content of what you talk about. And so, good thing is, our lessons are really face-to-face, on the ground. Bright City has their lessons in the air, that is, in online platforms, so they can be used around the world. And so what we've done is we give our lessons in this dynamic way, and what we have just shown just before I came here, the data is there are significant increases in measures of courage, decreases in social dominance orientation, which is part of being prejudiced and dominating rather than compassionate. But we reduce stress, anxiety, and depression in highly significant ways. Now, these are numbers. Let's go to a personal case study. We gave our program in a ghetto school in Oakland, California. The ghetto school is in a shopping mall. It's really sad to even be there. And one of the students in that class was an African-American youth, Philip Johnson, 16 years old. He's on a bus going home, and there's a kid having an asthmatic attack. He's wheezing, and the other kids say, throw him off the bus, shut up. He goes to the kid, he said, what's wrong? He says, I can't breathe, I lost my inhaler, I can't breathe. He goes to the bus driver, he says, please stop at a pharmacy. The bus driver stops, Philip goes with this kid in pharmacy, gets an inhaler, takes him home, literally saves his life. When he was interviewed later, the bus driver had called the police. They said, why did you do this? He said, I just finished learning the bystander effect in the HERO program at my school, and I could not do anything else but to take action. So here's one case of one kid who our program changed and probably saved the life of another student. So what can we do? The power of one. Be the one person who helps, and remember that your actions matter. In fact, when you do something positive and other people notice, you have a ripple effect, that your actions ripple and other people are more likely to do the positive thing. We also have lots of research that shows when you do a negative thing, violating some, crossing against a red light or any negative thing, and other people notice, it increases the negativity. The power of two. Be an ally and support other everyday heroes who are doing the right thing. We call it create pro-social squads, create hero squads. One of the reasons against being a hero is we conform. Other people say, mind your own business, don't do anything. So in my classes, I have kids be a deviant for a day. Put a black square on your forehead with an erasable pencil. And people say, what is that? It's a black square. They say, take it off. You say, no, I'm just trying something. You'll see the pressure people put on you to be what they want you to be. And if you can resist for one day the pressure of the group, then that liberates you to be an everyday hero. And lastly, expand your compassion. All of us are too focused on ourselves. When you go to a party, you say, will people like me? Will people ask me to dance? Will people offer me a drink? Will people remember my name? No. You become sociocentric we, not egocentric me. And your job is, at every place you go, make someone else feel special. Learn their name, look in their eye, remember their name, and give a compliment. A compliment about how they're dressed, a compliment about what they said, so that you make them feel special. And lastly, solidarity beyond borders. So our little hip project, which is struggling along in San Francisco. Our office is in my home. We have just a few part-time workers. We are now around the world. We are in 12 different nations. We just added France and Germany and Portugal. But the interesting thing is we're only on the West Coast. We're not in New York. So we need someone in New York to step up and say, hey, we want your program here. And I come and I do the training. But we are in Budapest, Hungary, in 1,000 high schools. This is a right-wing government, and our program is more vibrant in Hungary than any place else in the world. And also in Hungary, our program is not only in schools, but now in many businesses. I go to Poland every year. My wife is half Polish, and we have programs in Warsaw, in Krakow, and other places. As I said, my family is Sicilian. We have a program in Palermo, our hero program, but now the Sicilian government, which is really impoverished, invites African youth from 7 different African nations to come there. They put them in a shelter, they give them clothing, they teach them Italian language. And now in our program, we teach those African youth to be the teachers of Italian kids. So now they are teachers and have a new respect. We also give them some money, maybe 200 euro. They get 100, they send 100 home. So we show these African youth, instead of being accepted, are now cherished as leaders and teachers. If any of you are going to be in San Francisco, we're going to have a wonderful hero conference on April 21st and 22nd. It's the world's only heroism conference. We have 24 speakers, some who've done heroic deeds, some of who've studied the science of heroism, some of who've written made hero music, movies, and it's going to be inspirational. So just check us out, www.heroroundtable.com. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention and caring.
I want to call to the stage the members of our panel who are going to illustrate, among other things, the power of one, as Phil put it, people who really, by their actions and example, change things. First, Marguerite Barnquitsa, who was our first Aurora laureate in 2016, who was the founder of Maison Shalom and the Rima Hospital in Burundi, and you'll hear from her the stories of the remarkable things that she did with the great suffering in that country. Second, Lieutenant Bill Keegan, who is a retired lieutenant from the Port Authority Police Department, who, as he will tell you, was centrally involved in the events that this memorial and museum commemorate. And finally, John Prendergast, who is the founding director of the Enough Project, who has worked in government and in many different ways to mobilize action by others to reach out and make a difference in the world. So panelists, please have a seat, and we'll begin to talk about the experience that each of you has had. And Marguerite, I also want to call you Maggie because we spent time together 2 years in Yerevan, but I'm going to call you Marguerite. I'd ask you to tell this audience the beginning of your story in the terrible times in Burundi in 1993 with the great suffering, how you came to open your heart and your hands to others in that time. Tell us what that was like.
Thank you very much. Of course, I repeat often this story, but why I decide to create Maison Shalom, I had suffered so much. First, 2 days before the massacres in the Bishop House, I lost 60 members of my family. And I was obliged to leave my village where I live with 7 kids because I adopted 7 kids, 4 Hutu and 3 Tutsi children, because I decided when I was a teacher to show to my people, Burundian people who fight between the 2 tribes, Hutu and Tutsi, that it's possible to live together. Unfortunately, in 1993, in October, when they killed the president, then the Hutu, I am a Tutsi, came in my village and they massacred my family. But they can't kill, they said, this crazy woman who decide to adopt the 2 ethnic group, she said she's not Hutu or Tutsi. She said to us, she's only a mom. But then I have nowhere to go. Hutu didn't want me because I am a Tutsi. Tutsi didn't want me because I adopted Hutu children. I was thinking I can go to a sacred place in Bishop House, a Catholic Bishop House, and I met my colleague, Hutu and Tutsi. I said to them, now is the moment. We will show that we are one human family. But unfortunately, 2 days after, when we were together, I hid Hutu in the Bishop House, but Tutsi came to revenge. I recognized them, and I said to them, it was Sunday. Why you want to kill your brothers and sisters? They looked at me and said, they are your brothers and sisters? I said, of course. We are all children of God. We are human family. How you can kill those people? I don't want to allow you to kill your brothers and sisters. Then they took me and tied me and put the fire on the house, on the bishop house, because I refused to give the key. But when I saw that they put fire, I gave the keys. I said, please, don't kill your brothers. When they came, then they wait, and they killed 72 people in front of me. I can't accept that. I know that inside in our heart, and I remember that we can always continue to love. But how? I have no house, I have no family, and suddenly when I saw my friend Juliette, who have 2 little girls, coming. She was a Tutsi like me, but married to a Hutu. She looked at me and said, Maggie, she said to the killers, untied her. And she gave me Lydia and Lisette. Lisette was 3 years old and Lydia 1 year old. And she asked me, Maggie, now raise my children like yours. And I said, Juliet, how? And she asked to the killers and tied her. And I began to speak to the killers, please, don't kill children. And then they give me, I paid the money. They gave me children. And then I went in chapel. And I said, oh God, where are my children, my 7 children? And all those bodies were in front of me, 72 bodies. I went in chapel, I said, oh God, my mom lied to me. You are not love. How I am the sister of killers, because I know also the killers. I am a member of those killers. And then in the chapel, I took all the 25 children, and I said to the children, now you are a new generation. You are Hutu and Tutsi together. We will stand up, and we will show to the whole Burundian people that we refuse the hatred. And when I was crying, my 7 children, I didn't find them, but I hear that my first adoptive child, Chloe, said, Mom, we are in life. Then from this day, I have seen we can do something. I call all those children, and then I left the bishop house. I have no clothes. They took all my clothes. I was without clothes. Then after a child told me, but you have no clothes. And she took the coat, rideau, and I put on my body. And I went without knowing where to go. But during the way, one child told me, we can go and ask to a German people who worked in cooperation. He's not Hutu or Tutsi. And then he hid us. We were 32 children and me. I was the only adult, and I began with that. I began because I have seen in the eyes of those children the hope. And I was raised by a mom who told me that always the love will win. And who said to me, be a candle be a candle in darkness. Don't be afraid. You will always win. And it's why 25 years after, I can say to you, don't be afraid. It's a love who take always the last word. Because where they have killed people, I build even the cinema. Because I want in my hometown to show that we don't want to revenge. I build a swimming pool where they have killed the people in order to wash all those sinners. And also, I try to bring the killers, because sometimes we think that killers, of course, they must go. But if we don't forgive, if we don't bring the killers, they will again kill. Then I try to trace the children, to bring them to the killers, and asked to the killers to ask forgiveness, and the children forgive. And I built where they had killed my family, a big hospital. The name of the hospital was Rema. It was stand up, continue. And after I took even the children of the killers and I built the schools, I built even university because I was thinking to educate children together, the victims and also the killers together to create a new generation who will be able to rebuild the country. But unfortunately, again, 2 years ago, I became a refugee. But I didn't stop. I said, I will rebuild the country. I returned among the Burundian refugees to say to them, stand up. We rebuild hope. We try to heal also all those criminals. This is my story. This is your story also, because I believe that we are one human family.
Thank you, Marguerite. That story is so powerful because it reminds us that heroism begins with love and is about reconciliation. Something that you showed us. I remember when you received the Aurora Prize 2 years ago, just how moved all of us were to hear the story and to hear it again. Thank you. So I want to turn to Lieutenant Bill Keegan. There's nobody who has a more visceral connection to this place and what happened here than Bill Keegan does, as I hope he'll explain to us. The story, as you know, began in 1993 when there was an initial attempt to bomb the World Trade Center. Bill was centrally involved in that, and then he was the person who helped direct the efforts to rebuild, to discover the damage, to begin to excavate this place, to care for the people who died. So, Bill, maybe you could just talk us through those experiences as you lived them, both in 1993 and again in 2001.
Sure. First, I'd like to welcome everybody who's here from around the world, the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative. This was my home for 9 months, and this is an extraordinary museum and memorial that didn't get this way without a lot of hard work and a lot of pain and suffering on the part of the staff. This was a very emotional job that had a lot of authors and a lot of people that wanted their story told in different ways. This staff has done a fantastic job of putting together this museum and memorial. We're all very proud of it, and welcome. In 1993, I responded to the World Trade Center bombing, which we did not know at the time was a bombing. I put on a Scott Air Pack and made my way up the stairs, just like they did in 9/11, and I was walking past people as they were coming down. I got up to the 43rd floor in the South Building, and there we saw a couple of people banging through a hole in the wall, and they told us on the other side they had heard voices. And as we made this hole bigger, we realized that there was an elevator stalled right at that level. And what we discovered when we opened up the trap door on the top of the elevator is that it was full of kindergarten children with their teachers, and they were singing, and that's what we heard. The teachers had kept them busy. You talk about common hero, kept them busy. Just think about what was going through the teachers' minds at that point in time. And they were having people laugh and sing. Well, we started taking the kids up through that little trap hole and through the hole in the wall. And each one that came up, you could see the perplexed faces of the children. And you could see the relief on the teachers that they were being rescued and that their charges were going to be rescued. And that was an extraordinary event, and certainly, as we know, there were 6 people killed there. But unfortunately, due to our resilience, our fight, we fought right back. And the World Trade Center was open within days. And I don't think we gave the proper weight to what was actually happening. And obviously, we found out 8 years later, they revisited us. On 9/11, I had worked a midnight tour the night before, which was from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. I left around 5:30 in the morning, went home, and I was at a hospital appointment with my daughter when I got the phone call saying there's a small plane has hit the World Trade Center. They're activating everybody. You're going to need to come in. I drove home and realized now that the second plane had hit and people were screaming. And as I drove up the New Jersey Turnpike, 7 lanes of highway in each direction, I saw that it was closed. It was nothing but camouflage vehicles and ambulances. When I got to the World Trade Center, the worst news was given to me. So many people missing and so much destruction. I want to take you to a point in that rescue recovery. I guess it was about 10 days in, and we were all very highly trained in rescue, and that's what we wanted to use, our talents in rescue. We wanted to save people. That's what we do. Unfortunately, silently, we transitioned to recovery. And it was very difficult for us professionals to have to say that we weren't going to be able to bring anybody else out. But we repurposed ourselves, and what we realized is that these families at home were really dependent on us and our skills to do a different job now, to do a recovery job. And we needed to do that because that was the need. And that's what we did. And at the same time, we started to notice, because of the work we were doing, that this town, New York, this country, United States, and the entire world had turned their attention to this destruction and started sending their love. People were treating people differently. You know why? Because we weren't looking at what makes us different anymore. We were looking at what made us the same, and we saw pain and sorrow and despair. And people came rushing to it. There was no defenses anymore. We were open to help. Many of us, upon the closing of the site, retired. And what we found out when we retired is we didn't do this job for just money. It had become who we are, helping people on a daily basis in critical moments of their lives. And we were a little lost. We didn't have that purpose anymore. So I started Heart 9/11 and said to these wonderful people that I had bonded with and loved during that whole time, I said, there's a need out there, and we have the ability to fill that need, a vocation, if you will, where the world's greatest needs could be met by our desire to meet those needs. And we have the skill to do it. And that bond, that camaraderie that you hear a lot of times in the veterans, and as they're returning home, they get lost because they don't have that camaraderie and mission anymore. So what I did is basically built a platform from which rescue recovery workers from here, the police, the firemen, and the construction workers would again be able to purpose themselves to helping others with this incredible skills. And for many of us in the uniformed services, we have to submerge our empathy. We couldn't do our jobs on a daily basis if we felt empathetic towards every victim we ran into. And it changed us, right, to be able to do this. Well, that renaissance of empathy that occurred here, we needed a place to take it. We were fundamentally transformed. And we needed to find a place to do the work that we loved with the people we loved for the people who had a need for it. And it's been an extraordinary experience where we're able to take, and this is, I think, critical, the Armenian genocide, the civil wars, the pain, the suffering, what's going on in Africa. If we don't introspectively or reflectively look at what happened to us and how we got through it, and then if we don't process that and come out better, and then if we don't take those hard-learned lessons forward then what did we go through it for? And that's the key thing. We have to take these hard-learned lessons and share them with others. That's how we make sense out of the senseless. That's how we move civilization forward. And that's what's been the honor for me, is to be in front of groups like you, all well-meaning, loving people, and to be able to share this message of 9/11 and of 1993. We were just downstairs and we looked at the last piece of steel. It was very symbolic to us, because when we first discovered it, we said, that's the one we're going to leave till the very end. And it was, I got to tell you, it was very difficult to see the end. It had become so much of who we were and what we do. The love we felt, the love for each other, was coming to an end. And as we uncovered more and more of the steel, we decided to start putting markings. And if you go downstairs, you'll see PAPD 37, NYPD 23. You'll see FDNY 343. On the other side, you'll see CIV 2,700 and some odd. And what we started to do was mark it as the debris pile was leaving. When we finally took that last piece of steel out, we had decided we would do it silently without any what we call speechifying, because no words could properly put into perspective what we had just been through. And as we took that last piece of steel up that steel bridge, and we had been downstairs the whole time, we hadn't realized that tens of thousands of people had accumulated on West Street, and they were all standing there. And as we made that right-hand turn to head north on West Street, people were standing in large crowds and just clapping and mouthing the words, "Thank you." It was such a moment of collective love. It was such a moment where what we had all been through was let out. And we followed that last piece of steel up West Street, and that ended that particular time. And it was the beginning of this new time, where we've repurposed ourselves to the other needs that are out there in the world. And I am very honored to be here with this great panel. Thank you.
Bill, thank you. That's just powerful beyond anything that we could imagine. You really made us see through your eyes what you experienced. So I want to turn to John Prendergast. John has worked in crisis areas in Africa and Sudan and Uganda, in the Congo, and has seen suffering, has responded to it there as a government official. But I want to ask you, John, to talk about an essential part of what we're thinking about tonight, which is how people who hear these stories, who want to make a difference, make the transition to becoming significant players. And John has had the experience of working with famous movie stars, people like George Clooney, people like Robin Wright, people like Matt Damon, who wanted to make a difference in the world and found a way to do that, to get out of their celebrity status and move into a different place. And I thought this audience would be fascinated, John, if you just talk a little bit about how that happened with George and some of the others, how they moved from the power of one into the power of many, as Phil described earlier for us.
Well, first of all, I'm never going to forgive you for having me follow Maggie and Bill. Does anyone else want to take a shot at this? All right, breathe. So, 35 years now of my life, really my entire adult life, has been focused on trying to bring about attention and awareness about genocide, about mass atrocities that are occurring in the world today. Now, as our wonderful founders, Nubar and Ruben and Vartan know, our three amigos, they know, this is an almost impossible task. There's just so many competing issues and demands and on our time. So it makes sense to try to identify things in our culture, people and things in our culture that could potentially bring some light, shine some of the spotlight onto these issues. And so early on, I got a chance. I was sitting in a Capitol Hill event, and I got a chance to meet Angelina Jolie. And when we went on a trip together to Africa, and when we came back, we created at this point in time, this is sort of the mid-2000s, a web-based photo exhibit was the wild cutting edge of technology at the time. And Angie, she did this, she does her journals, and I do the political commentary. And this web-based thing got announced by People magazine, and it was hosted on the website of the Holocaust Museum, and it crashed the server. It had so many visitors, and people wanted to sign up and figure, what can I do? I was like, this is what I've been trying to do for years. This is what you're trying to do. Get people to activate and become aware. So, okay, I get it. It's not the only thing to do, but celebrities can play a role in, now, we're not talking about fixing streetlights or distributing food. This is, how do you counter genocide? How do you stop mass atrocities? So these are hard issues. Not every celebrity is going to get interested in this. So George's story basically is, he's a social justice kind of guy, as you all know, but he didn't have any particular interest in these issues or knowledge about them. But it so happened this moment in his life where his father ran for Congress and lost, bruising battle, just barely lost this race. And George saw his dad at one of his lowest points in his life. And he said, and he remembered his dad was a newsman. And he had one time had this chance to do this big story on CBS Evening News. I think it must have been Cronkite. And he was going to go on live with this story that he had been researching for months. And at the last minute, Elizabeth Taylor announced she was going to have another divorce. So they had to rush over there. and Mr. Clooney Sr., his moment was gone. And so George, remembering that, thinking about his father, said, Dad, why don't we go somewhere in the world? You be the newsman and I'll be Elizabeth Taylor. So they go off, and at the moment of time, the moment was Darfur. If many of you remember it, this almost social phenomenon where, this place half a world away in the middle of the Sahara Desert, no strategic interest whatsoever, the United States or in Europe or anywhere, they don't care. And suddenly, the idea that we could allow this thing that we said we'd never allow again, never again, genocide, Armenia, the Holocaust, Rwanda, on, happening again. 21st century's first genocide. And so George is like, Dad, let's go there. And over time, George and I began to work together. We spent a great deal of time in war zones in Africa. And instead of just being someone, he's a sophisticated operator. Instead of just being someone who, goes on a trip, comes back and says, hey, everybody, this thing's happening over here, it wasn't enough for him. So he said, let's take that spotlight, shine it on the place, but then figure out what to do. What can we do? Not the one, but the many. And so we started with this whole attempt to use satellite imagery to bring attention and awareness on these places where there were no independent or impartial observers, no journalists were allowed, no human rights workers were allowed into some of these areas in African war zones. We got these satellite companies to shine a spotlight into those areas. We had volunteer satellite imagery readers and developed a model to quickly demonstrate where these kinds of atrocities were occurring and have physical evidence to prove that it was happening, so that deniability was denied to these war criminals. It didn't matter. So the shame of being on the front page of the New York Times for someone who's willing to commit genocide turns out doesn't affect their calculation. So we had to go back to the drawing board and figure out, so what's the next thing? And so what do they care about? Somebody who's willing to commit a mass atrocity, somebody who's willing to stay in power through recruitment of child soldiers, through the use of mass rape as a tool of war, through the bombing of villages, what would affect their calc? Well, it turns out that most of these war criminals are the same people who are extracting the incredible wealth of Africa. You know, as we taxpayers send billions of dollars into these countries to clean up the horrible humanitarian messes, at the same time, through the same bank accounts, billions of dollars are going out because the gold and oil and diamonds and all the incredible, incredible natural resources are being shoveled out of there by the leaders. Same people who are committing or orchestrating the atrocities. We said, let's go after the money. Let's follow the money. Let's build a team of financial forensic investigators who can follow that cash into the real estate, into the shell companies, into all the things that the bank accounts. And so that's what George and I have done. And so he's taken this initial interest, just, hey, I want to help my dad. And he's slowly over time evolved his role into now a very sophisticated position where we are building dossiers and turning them over to global banks and turning them over to governments around the world and saying, this is a way to create a consequence for the commission of the ultimate crime, genocide, as a minimum step that the international community could take. So that kind of evolution, giving a person a chance to go from bystander to upstander, as Samantha Power, another Aurora board member, calls it, to become an upstander and to evolve how your role in being an upstander can be. I think George is a great example of that.
I love that story. Because I think it's safe to say that tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people learned about Darfur because George Clooney cared enough about it to go there and make a personal commitment. You should say that people should have known about it before, but the truth is that George, by stepping out of his comfort zone and making a personal commitment, made that real, and I think made a difference. So I want to go back to our panel for a second round of questions, and I want to begin with, I'm going to call you Maggie.
Yes.
To begin with Maggie, and just to ask you the question that's at the center of our conversation tonight, which is, what is it that gave you the courage, the commitment, the personal sense that you had to do something in that terrible moment in 1993? And what do you say, Maggie, when people ask you, as I'm sure many, many people do, what can I do? How do I learn from the example that you've shown? How do you answer that question?
I believe, first, I lost my father when I was only 5 years old. My mom was very young, 24 years old. And I remember always that she said to me that we have a sublime vocation, that we are amazing. She has never said to me that my dad died. In the evening, when we go to sleep, she always asked me, had you said to your father good night? I said, Mom, father is not there. But she said to me, she will be always with you because I believe that we are amazing. Why I do that? I believe that each human being, when I met him, I know that this people is amazing. And this is a wonderful vocation. The richness we have, it's why I can't never give up when atrocities arrive, because I believe that we are most powerful with our love. Inside in our heart, there are enough energies, enough love, enough compassion to create the difference. It's why even when they tired me, even that in 2015, I lost all those things and I fled. I took the plane without nothing, only trousers and handbag. And I arrived in Luxembourg without nothing. I met journalists. They asked me, now, Maggie, you lose everything. And I looked to them. No, look at me. I didn't lose nothing. Of course, I have no country, I have no home, but I have you. Because together, if we stand up, we can create an amazing world. And look to all those, we are here, all those three men, of course, you, Vartan, Nuba, and Ruben, you stand up one day. And look, we are now, I don't feel that I am a refugee. I don't feel that I am foreign here, because now we are one family. You believe? I believe that. And I am never, my sister Marie-Hélène sometimes asks me, but you are lying. How you promise, how you can promise? When I went with her in refugee camp, where were 2,000 students who were there in refugee camp, and I said to them, now begin to learn English. Next year, you will return in the university. Marie-Hélène was with me, said, but where you will find the money? I said, there is enough money in the world. They will give me this money, and then why they must spend money in a weapon? If they give me this money, I will send them back to university. And I was there, 24th of April. I got this award, and I was thinking, I said, wow! And I see in the TV, she was crying, Marie-Hélène, who is there, because she said to me, I am a liar?
Yes.
Eh?
A liar.
But don't be afraid. We are amazing. You are amazing. Wonderful things. Because we are also how we believe in the life. I am a Christian. I know that God creates us so powerful, but we are so stupid. We spend our time in stupid things than to spend our time in amazing things. Thank you.
I think I know the answer to my question, which is that if you look at Maggie and you listen to her, you can't help but believe that you want to make a difference, that she is just so inspiring. So I want to ask Bill about the work that he did after this very tragic series of events here at Ground Zero. You founded the group that you described, Heart 9/11, and reading about it made me think of something that I've seen often in my travels with militaries, with people in terrible crisis situations, which is what happens after that the difficult work, the moment of heroism is over. There is that post-traumatic moment where, what do you do now? And maybe you could talk a little bit more. I sometimes think that we don't always treat our heroes very well. We clap for them at ball games. We, salute them when we see them in or out of uniform. But in terms of really caring for them, sometimes that's missing. And maybe you could speak, Bill, about how your organization has tried to connect with people in that time after the great moment.
Yeah. So just the word hero alone already makes me uncomfortable. It really does. And I stopped asking people to stop saying it because I get it. I understand why you do it. But that's one of the difficulties. It really is. Because you don't feel as if you did anything other than what you needed to do and had to do. And you put one foot in front of the other and you accomplished. And you probably sit there and go, I wish I had done more today. I wish I could have done it. You know, if I had thought of this, and you beat yourself up and then you go back and you try to do it again. So that's a difficulty when you do that type of work. You're second guessing yourself at all times. You need to forgive yourself. You need to be able to get back up and do it all over again. It reminds you of the relief pitcher in baseball, right, that gives up the home run and then he has to come back and pitch the very next day. You know, you better have your A game coming back and forget about the day before. But it was really, we struggled for sure. And I stayed on a job. I did not have enough time to retire at the closing 2002. So I stayed around a few years. And in that time, I saw a lot of people struggling that left the fire department and police departments. And it was the purpose. They did not have purpose anymore in their lives. So we started to think of ways that we could do that and came up with the volunteerism of Heart 9/11, the incredible skill set. And one of the prompting things was the Hurricane Katrina, just when we thought with the Trade Center being so well orchestrated that how could they do such a poor job in New Orleans? And wouldn't they have benefited from our expertise and our experiences and taking our skills and experience and bringing it to these other places? And that really was the beginning of the catalyst of Heart 9/11. Why not share these lessons that we've learned? And that gave us some purpose. So that helped as sort of the carrot out of the PTS. If I could, I don't mind sharing with you a very personal story. I honestly, with all deference to you, Doctor, I did not believe in PTS. Okay. I had heard about it. I didn't believe in it. I don't know why I didn't believe in it. Maybe I didn't want it to happen, but I didn't believe in it. I left the site, and I guess it was in July or August of 2002. I was at a Chinese restaurant, and I was sent by my family to go get a lot of Chinese food, and it was very crowded. And as I walked in the front door, I saw all these people waiting to get towards the countertop. And with that, I said, you know, I got to go. And so the woman goes, Keegan. I said, yeah, Keegan. And with that, everybody recognized that they needed to separate. And as they separated, on the counter was a stack of red bags containing my food. And as we know, those red bags were what we used down here at the Trade Center. And it stopped me dead in my tracks. It just stopped me where somebody had to prompt me by hitting me in the shoulder and go ahead, choose. And I got through it, and I walked up, and I paid, and I walked out, and I got in my car, and I drove home, and I ate, and that's about all I remember. And I realized the next day that that's what they're talking about. I was triggered like that to a place I don't know, that all I knew I was out of body for at least 24, 36 hours. Nothing I said or did I could remember. And that's when it dawned on me. I made this super colossal mistake. We were supposed to go to Disney World in November 2001. Obviously, we didn't go. But I told my family, who I had been away from for 9 months, I said, we're going to go to Disney World. The minute I get out of here, we're going to Disney World. Well, just, yeah, can you imagine that trip for me a week or two after the World Trade Center? All I could think about as I watched families go by with their little kids by their hands is all of my friends that will never be with their family. And it was just nightmarish. And is this going to be my life? So we struggled through it, and we came up with other ways of us being able to build ourselves up. And that's what we wanted to share. Then we saw all the military people who had come down to the World Trade Center to get stickers, to see it for themselves before they deployed. And now they're coming home hurt. And maybe we're in a position to help them. So we start building homes for veterans. and we start responding to disasters. There's no lack of work for us, unfortunately, as you will well attest, as you were saying, with genocide. And so this is what we began to do in order to help ourselves. So my last point, and I think it's important, especially unfortunately for the last week, what we've been through, following the Newtown Sandy Hook school shooting, I was asked to come up to Newtown and talk to the police department, and I did. But it wasn't until 18 months later where they asked me to come back up because they realized maybe their people weren't doing so good. Maybe they had misread signals, and maybe they could really use talking to somebody like me and the 9/11 people from Heart 9/11. So we went up there, and boy, what we found was really troubling because they were us, but they were down the road 18 months, and they had done something that I had never heard of. And we were working with Yale University at the time to help. They had concretized themselves. Nothing in, nothing out. Very difficult population to work with anyway, on the best of circumstances, but under these circumstances, it was almost impossible. So we said to the people in Newtown Foundation, we're going to need to be here a year. So there was 2 Heart 9/11 members from 9/11 that were there every day, Monday through Thursday, every week. We didn't go anywhere. We sat in their muster room, and sometimes we didn't say a word. We sat there. How you doing? How you doing? What are you guys doing? Why are you here? We're here for you, man. When you're ready, we're ready. See, it's not on our time. It's on their time. When they're ready. Not when I'm ready to hear, when they're ready to talk. That led us to the Harvard School of Medicine. I mean, if you think this is being heady for me, you go into the halls of the Harvard Medical School and talk to like a guy like Dr. Herbert Benson, who is the Benson Henry Institute. And all of a sudden, Herb is talking to me like we're equals. I'm like, holy crap, what's going on here, right? So he asked me, he goes, Bill, he's a wonderful man. He goes, the waters of my life are right under my chin, Bill. And this extraordinary work I've been doing since 1981 needs to get out to your population of people. Will you do that for me? Will you be our messenger? Yes. What do you say? Yes. I've learned to say yes a lot in life anymore because it always leads me to good things. I said yes. So now we're working with Harvard to begin to put together a program for first responders that will include cognitive behavior modifications, meditation, appreciations for life and what we do really well, and what is important in life with us, where our families are, and loving the moment. And that is what we're right now putting together. So disaster response, building homes for the troops as they're returning, and now helping other first responders that are going through traumatic events. These were the cops that processed and went into that school in Sandy Hook and heard the kids. They're the people who processed that crime scene. They can't believe what we did, and I can't believe what they were tasked to do. That's where we meet. And that is the story of Heart 9/11.
So, John, in our last couple of minutes before we go to another hero by video, I want to ask you to close out our discussion by talking just a moment about what really is the big challenge, I think, coming out of this event and coming out of the Aurora initiative, which is how does this become a grassroots movement? How do we build something that's a lot bigger than the people in this room, the people who may watch it, the people who already are involved, so that there really is a movement for commitment, for caring, for change? How do you think we should begin to think about that?
Well, I do think that the word you used in the question is the answer, and how you do that then is the details. But the answer is in movement building. You know, if you think about our own history here in this country, whenever there's been a major standing up against injustice, whenever there's been a major diversion from one path to a more righteous path, it has been as a result of people banding together, people like everyone in this room saying enough is enough about whatever that particular injustice was, and committing themselves to do it. And often it starts in small rooms like this, and grows and grows. So I think that the idea of a movement, a civil rights movement, the women's movement, the labor movement, and then the movements that have influenced the course of history outside of our country, where the Blood Diamonds movement in Africa and the efforts around Darfur that ensured that life-saving aid was going in there, the Invisible Children, if you remember, the high school students who were standing up against child soldier abduction for a decade and having a major impact on policies in the United States and Europe from high school kids. I mean, these movements are at the core, I think, of change. So I think that the key is to create and channel people's interests and energy into organizations that deal with the issues that we care about. So there are, every one of us has probably a long list of causes we really care deeply about. And many of those things we just look at them and say, that's terrible, or talk about them. But to actually do something, you got to join one of those organizations that's building the movement to deal with the environment, or to deal with environmental destruction, or to deal with human rights abuses, or to deal with the kinds of issues that Bill has been talking about. Whatever the thing is that you care about, but get involved and dive into that and join. So finding vehicles to encourage people to get off the couch and get engaged and involved in a particular social cause and social movement, I think is really fundamental. One thing I would close with would be to say, which I found to be very empowering, was a study that I saw, which claimed to be in one of these psychological magazines, Psychology Today or something like that. And it was the largest study of its kind. I don't know how many there have been of this, but where the question was asked, what motivated you to get involved in a particular issue? And what sprung you into action? And the third most cited response in the questionnaire was that the respondees had seen an advertisement that was some kind of a video or printed ad that got them interested in the issue. Okay. Second most cited reason for why people get involved in an issue, according to this study, was because a celebrity, somebody they followed, was interested in the issue, they learned about it, and they dug into it, and they said, well, you know what, I'm going to get involved in this. But by far, and this shocked me, by far the most cited reason people got involved and engaged in an issue of concern to them, outside of their own sort of comfort level, is because a friend or family member had asked them to. They had said, this matters to me, whether it was face-to-face or now in this day and age, of course, through the various mechanisms of social media and all the ways we engage with each other communally, can be used for such negative purposes, but can also be used for such incredibly good purposes, that when somebody asks them to do something, to get involved, to say, this matters to me, come join me, here's something you can do. I mean, what a lesson, what a powerful lesson, at least to me, is if we, sharing our interests and our concerns in this room, decide this particular problem is something we want to work on together, and reaching out to the networks that we all have in this room. I mean, the impact one can have, it's that ripple effect, is quite enormous. And it's been proven, frankly, throughout history, especially in the context of people's movements and social movements. So that's how I would answer that.
My takeaway from that, John, is we should all tell a friend. When we leave tonight, we should get on the phone. We should call some people. We should tell them about what we heard and talked about tonight. So we now have a chance to hear by video from, as I said earlier, a real hero, like all the people we've been talking with tonight, Dr. Tom Katina. last year's Aurora Prize winner, who is almost the only doctor, the only surgeon in his part of the Nuba Mountains, who spends days, sometimes night and day, operating on people, saving lives. Really extraordinary person, as you'll see, I'm sure, the minute you hear him begin to talk. If you want to know more about Dr. Tom's work, his organization, the Catholic Medical Mission Board, has a documentary and information about him. Really an extraordinary person. So let's hear from him. Of course, he's in the Nuba Mountains operating, but let's hear from him by video.
Hello, this is Dr. Tom Katina talking to you from the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. I want to just say I'm very sorry that I cannot be with you today at the Solidarity Beyond Borders Aurora Dialogues. I want to say hi to Maggie and to all those participating in today's event. You know, I think the word hero is something that we don't want. We don't want to be called a hero. Having this moniker applied to us makes us very uncomfortable. It makes us feel like we always have to do something heroic. We always have to be dashing into burning buildings, saving a child. And you know, I think that's not the real essence of being a hero. The premise of being a hero starts with the idea that all lives have inherent worth and value. This will lead us to believe that my life is not worth more than somebody else's, despite my background, despite the fact I was born in a wealthy country. We all have the same value in the eyes of God. If we adopt this value, this will lead us to do things that are in fact considered heroic, whether it's going into a war zone, dashing into burning buildings to save somebody. But more importantly, all of us have the capability and the potential to do heroic things. Often that's not something very dramatic. I think of things like sticking things out when things get tough, to stay in a certain situation when you find the frustrations beyond your capabilities, and just doing it for the good of the people there, doing it because you know it's the right thing to do, doing it because you know if you leave, people will suffer. You take the value of others as important as your own life. I would encourage all of you to not look at this as being something impossible, something only others can do. This is something we all have the capability of doing. So I wish you all well. Thank you very much.
So our panel is now going to leave the stage, and we're going to turn it over for closing remarks to one of Aurora's co-founders, Nubar Afan, who was Senior Managing Partner, Chief Executive Officer of Flagship Pioneering, and helped bring this marvelous project together. Nubar.
Well, if John felt inadequate at the end of that panel, imagine me. Well, first, let me also thank Alice and the 9/11 Memorial Museum for allowing us to jointly host this event. I want to just give my thoughts, reflections about this. This was, I'm in my day job involved in founding companies, and the word founder, co-founder is used a lot in my business. But I was sitting there thinking, boy, this is profound. And that's a whole nother meaning behind it. What we heard, what we've experienced tonight is indeed profound. And what I want to just share with you is a little bit of why it is that we, the three co-founders and others, went down this path. Because there is a common theme with what you heard and what we have felt and what the Armenian experience has been. On the 100th commemoration, the 100th anniversary of the genocide, many Armenians throughout the world began to realize that the pain of what our ancestors went through was alive and well. And we were feeling it in our daily lives. That doesn't bode well for Holocaust survivors 100 years from now. It doesn't bode well for Rwandan genocide survivors. Because, see, our families have been trying to get rid of this feeling for a long time. And I think one of the things with my partner, and even though he's younger than me, in many ways a mentor, Ruben Vardanyan, we've spent the last 17 years working on helping Armenia as a country emerge out of the Soviet Union and begin to get up on its feet economically and socially and begin to prosper. And we kept feeling there's this force holding us back. And as we've gone on and talked to thousands and thousands of different people through various means, we realized that actually this feeling of being a survivor continues to haunt us, because there's really no meaning to be given a second chance. And as a people, as a country, we really haven't found a good use of it. And you'll see what I'm getting at in a minute, because I couldn't agree more with what Lieutenant Keegan said. And on the 100th anniversary, we began to wonder, what can we do to take this memory, this experience, this injustice, and turn it for good? And we began to realize that we've gone through a process of going from being merely surviving to reviving, and in many ways now thriving. And what it takes to do that, and what responsibility that leaves us with, was what we began to study. And the Aurora Initiative is really the result of that, because we began to realize that our experience, the experience of others in wars and genocides, in other disasters, people who are near death actually go through the same journey. And we heard highly disparate examples of that with Maggie and Lieutenant Keegan today, and in the many, many experiences we've seen as part of the Aurora Initiative. But there's a common thread, and that is, when you're given a second chance in life, what are you going to do about it, right? And again, you might say, well, you're not a survivor, you're a descendant of a survivor. But it turns out that the families of survivors live with these stories. This is what our lullabies sound like. This is what our family stories sound like. It just doesn't go away. And so the only way it's going to go away, maybe it's never going to go really away, is to turn it for some force of good. So that's what ties us to this sacred place, 9/11. Because every time these events happen, when 9/11 happens, when last week Florida happened, when I watched these kids on television saying, why was this allowed to happen? Why did it happen to us? Why did nobody defend us? These are the same statements that the Armenian orphans said 100 years ago, that today people in Syrian deserts are saying again. That same commonality, actually, you can begin to realize, gives you at least the sense that you're not alone going through this journey, and that there is a way through this journey. So for us, it's important, it's symbolic, and we're really thankful for being given this chance to come and share that message, share that experience, share the results of some of the work we're doing at this place. Because in addition to being Armenians, many of us are Americans. And part of the experience we've gone through and we can bring to the fabric of being American is also being a survivor, just like a lot of folks who've gone through the Holocaust and who've ended up in the States. So for us, Aurora is really a lot about second chance, finding meaning in the movement that allows a survivor to progress to being now reviving and thriving. And then finally, getting strong enough to think about gratitude. And I think that this sense of gratitude, it was interesting to hear Dr. Katina mention it, it was interesting to hear others, that the word hero makes them uncomfortable. And I was sitting there thinking, well, that's okay, Lieutenant Keegan. It's okay for you not to be a hero to yourself, but other people you can be a hero for. And that's really got nothing to do with you. That's kind of an out-of-body experience for you. You don't have to be a hero for yourself. I think it's pathological when people feel like they're heroes to themselves. But I think it's a different form of hero. And it's okay to be a hero. In fact, it's even okay, to the doctor's comments, to be a superhero. And in that regard, the cartoons know how to do that. And the reason for that is that it allows actually not only people to be driven and inspired by your actions, but also for the survivors, for the people who are grieving, to be able to express gratitude. Because in a way, a lot of the people who saved the lives of others in these moments, Maggie, many, many thousands of people, need somebody to express gratitude to at first. And the first person they're going to look to are the people who are stepping in and helping them survive. But then the second people they're going to turn to is to say, who's doing that work today? Because, you see, 100 years after the Armenian genocide, when Ruben, Vartan, I, many others said, who are we thankful for today? Who's alive today? Turns out there are thousands of such people doing the exact same thing as the people who saved our ancestors' lives today. And we said, well, let's go find them. First, let's go find them and let's actually allow them to serve as heroes to others, to motivate their work. And then second, let's find the survivors. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. Again, that's why we're here today. Because the survivors also need to get strength from each other. And I'm no expert in this. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a historian. I'm not a policeman. We're just kind of realized that it's almost an obligation for us to create a movement where survivors can actually help each other anywhere in the world cope with this long journey where you lose. See, at one point I read that when we're born of natural parents. But when we survive, we're born again with no parents. And that strips the meaning of being alive. And we then look for meaning for that second life. And these kinds of initiatives, the Heart 9/11 initiative, many other things, frankly, what we're doing is partly therapy for us. Because at some level, if that's gone, and you're trying to figure out why you survived and the person next to you died, as in many of the people who experience war, and it just seems so arbitrary, so chance-driven, turning that to some good is kind of what this is about. So the notion of gratitude for us, we use the words gratitude in action, comes from that kind of hollow feeling, looking for meaning, looking to express gratitude. So what I'm going to do is pause here, show you a little bit the last piece of what our initiative has done in terms of the impact, show a little video, and then I have one closing final statement, very brief, and then we'll be done. So if we can go to the video.
Aurora Prize will change the mind of the people.
I think Aurora and I think Armenians see it as they were one time oppressed, genocide, pushed down. Now, after 100 years of this, the Armenian people are giving this huge prize, this big award. They're giving out to the rest of the world.
Our NICU serves well over 200 babies a year. I think we're writing the record for the smallest baby surviving. No matter how that small that little foot is that we are saving, it may leave a very big print on the world one day.
This is one of the most isolated places in the world, Nuba Mountains. Now becomes a medical center. I would see that as a dream. I think for me, the greatest joy I've ever experienced is when a person goes from a point of certainly this person would have died to the point where they have complete recovery. This is a tremendous feeling.
When we go back in Burundi, they are not people.
To educate young people means they will never think to take a weapon. They will change their lives to transform the whole community for young people.
One of each 6 children under 5 years old suffer of chronic malnutrition. And mainly we have focused on improving the nutrition of the children and the pregnant women. We give information, education.
We have children who are born with HIV and AIDS. We support their health. We also support them in school. We pay their school fees. We take interest in their nutrition. We also tell them why the funding is coming. It's because of the suffering that was there in the past. And the survivors who remain started this to give thanks back Now we try to help to link up with our own situation. And we tell them, how can we learn from the experience of the Armenian people?
I think for humanitarian organizations, one key thing is to come and show solidarity with the people on the ground. Make it so it's permanent, that the help there is permanent, not a flash in the pan, here today, gone tomorrow.
Thanks to Aurora Prize, we are going to create a vegetable growing cooperative to increase the solidarity in the community and increase the level of life.
We have livelihood, economic support for Burundian refugees.
Our project gives them microcredits so that they can make an investment.
These children who are in a very criminal context find a space of peace, a space of love. Aurora Prize very concretely saved now for 5 years this project. Aurora is throwing a snowball, but the snowball is going down and becoming bigger and bigger. And I think we will, in some years, see that it is much more than this single prize.
Aurora Prize is a new answer to look to the future.
How do you live a good life? Christ laid out very easily. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Jesus kind of didn't come and give us a big laundry list of things we have to do. And he said, look, take care of people. You take care of the least of my brothers and sisters, you take care of me.
We are more powerful because of love.
We are all human beings, supposedly to be handiwork of God and creatures of God. I'm very proud that we remember our genocide, but we think of humanity. We are unique, but we think of universals.
This gratitude in action concept is really the foundation of the Aurora Prize. We created this as initially a small movement, but we are seeing it grow. We want to inspire those that received help from others to reciprocate, and when they get stronger, give back.
When we started this project, it was 3 of us. It's 3 of us become 70 people in 2016 and 200 people today. I ask you all to stand up, people who support this project and they're in whole. And I want people to see it. Don't be shy. Don't feel it's bad. Please stand up. I want to be able to say who support the project. I want to say we are a network who make really this all possible. And I want to say really, brothers, sisters, thank you. I believe it's the only way we need to do together.
Just to wrap up, sorry, we went a little over in time. Just to have one last thing that I want to do tonight. We are, as I mentioned earlier, many of us of Armenian heritage here, Armenian Americans. And it turns out that through the work of the head of the Genocide Museum in Armenia, Haik Demoyan, and Haik, you're in the room, I think. Through his tireless work, Haik has prepared because of all the records he was able to obtain over the years of what Americans did to help Armenians during the genocide. And he expanded this research, given that he's got a historian background. And what he's prepared is a book that actually is published and is here for the first time today. And it is a book called The Armenian Legacy in America, a 400-year heritage. And it documents the first known recorded Armenian who came to the US 400 years ago. Martin the Armenian, he was called, in Virginia. It's true, there are records of this. And it documents through a large set of photographs and other materials that are captured here, the history of Armenians in this country and what it meant for them, especially after World War I, just how many Armenians came here and established themselves, joined the great, wonderful, unique fabric that the United States is. And this book just was published with the support of the Aurora Initiative, and we're pleased to be able to bring this book to you today. On your way out, those of you who want to carry what is at least a conversation topic for your friends home, we have copies of the book for you. It's not available yet in any other way. And on this occasion, I wanted to just ask you for your indulgence for one more minute, because we'd like to present the very first copy of the book to the 9/11 Memorial. Please. Thank you so much. So this is a special copy. The irony, it's printed in Armenia. Wasn't quite smuggled in, but it had to be brought in. You can imagine the bags that were checked to be able to bring this along. Thank you, Lara. And the second copy of this book that we have, especially bound, we'd like to also give as a gift and a gratitude to the Carnegie Corporation. Really no other institution has done more for philanthropy in the world as Carnegie. And Vartan, our colleague, being here, we'd like you to accept it, Vartan, on behalf of the Carnegie Corporation.
I was asked years ago to join Cincinnati Society. Cincinnati Society is descendants of George Washington's officer corps. And I was very astonished they proposed. So I told them, number one, I don't have a beard like your forefathers. If you've chosen that for you, wrong. Second, if you've chosen on the fact that there was even a single Armenian in George Washington's army, you're wrong. But I know why you chose me, because Mount Ararat was the place where Noah's Ark landed. I come from Caucasus, since all of them were primarily not only Anglo-Saxon, but pilgrims, including the ship that brought pilgrims here. I said, you chose me because I am from Caucasus. I said, matter of fact, I'm the only Caucasian here, I said, because none of you look Caucasian. Thank you very much for the book.
And then I'll end by having one last copy given to David Ignatius, not only in gratitude for all of the support he's given us in many of these events, and tonight with the dialogue and really inspiring us in the way he's handled the topic, but also because his father, who was Secretary of the Navy of the United States, is featured in this book as an integral part of the Armenian American Society. David. Thank you. We have a reception outside, copies of the book for those who want to take you, and thanks again for this opportunity.